It's easy to root for a movie's heroes, but villains are usually the best part of a movie. Maybe it's because they dress cool, maybe it's because they have all the best lines, or maybe it's because they always look like they're having way more fun than anybody else around them. But maybe, just maybe, it's because we occasionally agree with at least part of the logic behind their less than noble endeavors. While we'd never condone these evil characters, we still can't help but think that they might have had a point now and then. The Wicked Witch. Yes, she chases Dorothy halfway around Oz, hell-bent on catching her and her adorable little dog too, but the Wicked Witch may just be misunderstood. Bloodlust aside, all she really wants is to get her hands on those glistening ruby slippers that Dorothy makes her way across Oz in. Don't forget, those magic shoes do not belong to Dorothy. She actually scores them from the lifeless body of the Wicked Witch's sister, whom she lands on with her house.
Slippers, yes.
From a legal standpoint, Dorothy's possession of those slippers is questionable at best, and one could hardly blame the Wicked Witch for desperately trying to reclaim a family heirloom that rightfully should have passed to her. Roy Batty. One of the central questions in 1982's Blade Runner is whether replicants are really people or if they're merely meant for slave labor. For Big Bad Roy Batty, the answer is clear. He is sentient, and he does not want to be destroyed by Deckard or one of his cohorts for being some anomaly.
I've seen things you people wouldn't believe.
So he engages in a massive slaughter spree that lands him on the Tyrell Corporation's most wanted list. But Batty doesn't think of himself as some kink in the system. He knows he's proof of evolution. So the question becomes, was his bloody flight to Earth the act of an evil robot? Or was it the act of a sentient revolutionary who just wants to live and to try and understand the humanity with which he's been blessed? One should hardly need a Voight-Kampff test to know the answer to that question. Detective Jack Doyle. There really aren't many good guys to cheer for in 2007's pitch-black crime drama Gone Baby Gone. In fact, the film presents a particularly damning view of metropolitan Boston brimming with drunks, druggies, gangbangers, and more. But the biggest baddie is none other than Morgan Freeman's unassuming Detective Jack Doyle, who's guilty of kidnapping a 4-year-old girl and colluding with his police buddies to cover up the crime. But the crime may not be as immoral as it seems on the surface.
I'm coming here trying to get noble, boy.
See, the parents of the missing girl turn out to be a no-good junkie of a father and a raging drunk of a mother with absolutely no parental instincts or moral compass. So they aren't exactly upstanding citizens, and Doyle's abduction is really just a noble attempt to give the whip-smart little girl a real shot at life. And nobody, not even Casey Affleck's do-gooding private detective, believes she's going to get that with her mother. Principal Ed Rooney. It's almost impossible to like Principal Rooney. He's stuck up, he's rude, he's got that awful mustache, and he has it out for the most lovable of scamps, Ferris Bueller. But if you stop and think about Ferris Bueller's Day Off for even half a second, you might start to see that Bueller is no prize himself. He's brash, cocky, and overbearing, and he's wearing a sweater vest for crying out loud. That alone is a crime of fashion. So suffice it to say, he needs some kind of lesson to get his act together. Who better to teach that lesson than a dedicated educator and impassioned public servant like Ed Rooney? We can all agree that Principal Rooney took matters a tad too personally, and ultimately way too far, but we can't help but admit that he was kinda right. Ferris Bueller is a total Weisenheimer who lies to his parents, skips school, bullies his best friend, steals a priceless car, and impersonates a distinguished sausage entrepreneur for the purpose of stealing his reservation at a fine dining establishment. And he gets away with all of it. Miranda Priestley. The Devil Wears Prada's fashion-savvy villainess is condescending, self-centered, and not afraid to demand perfection from everyone around her, especially her new assistant Andy. But then, she is the head honcho of a massive publishing empire, and any woman running a billion-dollar company in a male-dominated business environment is probably being held to a different standard than her male counterparts, which means nothing less than perfection will suffice to keep her on top.
Which exposed the exploit.
So how can she expect anything less from the people around her? As hard as Miranda is on Andy, she's just as hard on everyone else. It's worth noting, too, that Miranda's approach actually works. Throughout the film, she manages to pull the best out of every single person around her, including Andy. The U.S. government. Let's face it, pegging the U.S. government as a villain is not as hard as it used to be. But back in 1982, E.T. the Extraterrestrial had to exaggerate their threat factor a bit by making them gun-wielding goons who strong-arm kids just trying to have a good time with their new otherworldly pal. But their bad rap might be misplaced in this movie. After all, they are investigating what may or may not be a hostile alien invasion, and without access to the creature, how are they supposed to know he's a lover, not a fighter?
Tea, dear tea.
They could just ask Elliot, of course, but as far as they know, the powerful psychic bond the boy shares with the alien being is just some unknown form of mind control. In the end, those agents are a bit coarser than they have to be, but if and when a real alien invasion happens, you'd probably want the feds to take all precautions, wouldn't you? General Francis Hummel. Speaking of federal foes, The Rock's General Hummel is a guy responsible for instigating a hostage crisis on Alcatraz and threatening to unleash weaponized nerve gas on San Francisco if the government doesn't pay him $100 million. But really, Hummel has no intention of releasing any chemical weapons on anyone. He only leads the abhorrent mission in an effort to get compensation for families of fallen soldiers after the government refuses to honor or support them. He even tries to do it the honest way first. Did we mention that the ransom money was to be collected from an illegal government slush fund, too? Call us crazy, but Hummel sounds more like an impassioned advocate for veterans' rights than a villain. Walter Peck. Ghostbusters baddie Walter Peck is exactly the sort of snooty, stick-up-his-butt bureaucrat you'd expect to show up at your door if you've got an unlicensed, unregulated, and massively unstable nuclear reactor tucked away in the basement of a near-condemned building. Even if Peck is boorish and confrontational and easy to hate, he's still just doing his job of protecting the environment from harm.
Yes, it's true. This man has no d***.
Yes, everything is holding okay until Peck turns off the electricity, but how is he supposed to know he'd be opening the gates to a near-apocalyptic supernatural event? Syndrome. It's an age-old question as to whether villains are the result of nature or nurture, but in the case of The Incredibles, the latter certainly seems to be true. After all, Buddy Pine is a born genius who was a wizard with tech and capable of greatness even as a young man, and he really wants to be a hero.
Who are you supposed to be?
Well, I'm Incredible!
When he tries to join up with Frozone and the Incredible family, however, those heroes respond with excessive scorn and ridicule before ostracizing the gifted young inventor for not being blessed with superhuman abilities. It's their cruel shunning that gives birth to the genius supervillain Syndrome, so one could hardly blame him for harboring a deep-rooted resentment towards the conceited superheroes who wouldn't let him play along.
This isn't the end of it!
The Xenomorph Queen. Picture this. You're living a quiet life on a desolate planet so far out in deep space that virtually no other living being can even find you. Then one day, spaceships show up full of alien creatures sent by a greedy corporation to rob your planet of precious minerals and, let's be honest, probably destroy your home's ecosystem in the process. That, in a nutshell, is what the alien story might look like through the eyes of the Xenomorph Queen. It's kind of like Avatar, but without the pretty blue people. The Xenomorph Queen might serve as the central villain in the Alien franchise, but for her, these human invaders are pretty hell-bent on capturing, weaponizing, or outright destroying her legions of unborn children. So the question becomes, is the Xenomorph Queen an evil alien creature out to destroy humans? Or is she a doting mother out to protect her home, her family, and maybe her entire species? Elijah Price. Unbreakable's Elijah Price is definitely not one of the good guys. With countless casualties caused by his hand and the full breadth of his treachery still unknown, Elijah is basically the poster boy for homegrown terrorism. And no, his own tragic circumstances don't even come close to excusing his actions.
In a comic, you know how you can tell who the arch villain's going to be? He's the exact opposite of the hero.
But at the end of the day, those deplorable acts do exactly what Elijah expects them to do. Find someone on the opposite end of the spectrum as himself. Someone whose bones didn't shatter like glass. Someone strong as a team of oxen and tough as a tank. Someone who could only be classified as a superhero. That's exactly what David Dunn turns out to be. And try to remember that Dunn may never embrace his gifts if Elijah Price doesn't push him to do so. That might have been enough for Price to claim hero status himself, if not for all the pyromania and bombings and such. Jigsaw. We're not going to say we saved the best for last, because there isn't much to like when it comes to the torturous psychopath we've come to know as Jigsaw. As far as movie villains go, John Jigsaw Kramer is pretty much the worst of the worst. But it's still important to note that while he doesn't make it easy for some people to live, he technically never ends anyone's life with his own hands. His twisted traps and devices are puzzles meant to be solved so that the people trapped inside, most of whom have questionable morals to begin with, can escape with a newfound respect for their miserable little lives. It's also worth noting that those who do escape ultimately do seem to find new purpose.
And brought meaning to it.
Throw in Jigsaw's own backstory as a dad-to-be who tragically loses everything before surviving his own near-death experience, and it's a little easier to see him as a radical life counselor. Of course, to do that, you'd have to overlook all of the torture and blood on his evil hands. Hey, nobody's perfect, right? Thanks for watching. Click the looper icon to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Plus, check out all this cool stuff we know you'll love too.